Hi, friends. In this episode, I'm speaking with Michael Phillips. Michael is the founder and head of Phillips Consulting, a management consulting firm specializing in commercial negotiations. Michael is also the author of the book, The Naked Negotiator. This book is a very engaging and exciting story of the lead character, Ellen, as she navigates the challenge of negotiating a pay raise. Join me as Michael shares many pearls of wisdom on how to have a successful career and negotiate the salary that you deserve. Securing a big salary should be as easy as asking for more, right? Turns out it's a little bit more than that. First, let me ask you, which of these apply to you? Reading org announcements with envy as other people get promoted? Working long hours with little to show for it? Getting more degrees, hoping to be seen. Don't feel bad. I made the same mistake myself without even realizing it. And it's not your fault. In this podcast, I'm going to help you master the strategy and techniques on how to get promoted, how to double your paycheck, and how to secure more flexibility without adding more work or more degrees.
You are listening to Salary Negotiations Made Simple, the show that builds your confidence and inspires you to negotiate for the career you deserve. Do you want to double your salary, secure an ideal career, and increase your confidence to powerfully negotiate every career move? Then you are in exactly the right place.
Hi, Michael. How are you? Welcome to the studio.
Hi, yes, I'm fine, thank you. Great to be with you.
Great to have you. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Michael. Give us a understanding of what you do and how you help.
Okay, so I run a small management consulting company which focuses on commercial negotiations. And so I act as a consultant going into organizations, manufacturing companies, public bodies, advising their people about how to negotiate and actually leading negotiations for important contracts with them. So that's essentially what I do, and I've been doing that for some 30 years now.
Wow. It's wonderful to have your 30 years of experience to share with our audience. And our audience focuses more on negotiating pay raises and salary negotiation. And you've written a book on this. Tell us a little bit about the book, because I think we'll spend a lot of time diving into it in this episode.
Yeah, so those 30 years I've spent working for corporations, obviously I've learned a great deal in that. And I thought, how can I share this in a way that, how can I put it, doesn't really benefit corporations, but benefits ordinary people? And of course, the one obvious thing is helping people to negotiate salaries, because the theory behind negotiating, whether you're negotiating a multi-billion-dollar contract or negotiating your pay rise, the basic theory is the same. And so this is where I came up with the idea for writing a book that's very accessible, easy to read, non-academic, but also rigorous. And that was the idea behind the book. And so really it uses salary negotiation as a case study. Actually, it's got negotiating theory in it for almost any negotiation you do, but it is focused on salary negotiation and is intended to help people with that, what is often quite a daunting task that people have.
Yeah. And accessibility, I think, is the key, because a lot of people fear negotiation. And in the book, Ellen, who is the protagonist, and we follow Ellen's journey, she's very hesitant to negotiate. Can you explain why people fear negotiation? Why is this such a unreachable topic or technique that people don't want to learn or don't want to hear about? And what recommendation do you have for people to get over that fear?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, that the character in the book is called Ellen. So I've written it in a narrative style. It's like a short story, and it follows Ellen, the lead character, and she gets guidance from this eccentric elderly negotiator. But yes, Ellen is fairly typical of someone in her position, that she loves her job. She has a great boss. She enjoys her work, but she just feels that she's underpaid and she needs more money for her life. But the idea of going into a boss who she respects is daunting. I think sometimes people feel that asking for more money is, I don't know how you could, a little bit treacherous. It's not a reasonable thing to do. And so the negotiator helps her to understand that everybody has a value for the job they do. So part of her task is to go away and find out what a typical salary is for her role, her experience, the industry she's in, so that she can understand that when she goes to ask for a pay rise, she's not being at all unreasonable. All she's saying is, this is the fair market price. And I think it's not an unreasonable thing to ask, that I could be paid at a reasonable market price. And that doesn't have to be done, if you like, in an accusational way. Sometimes corporations can get out of touch and not realize that people are falling behind on salaries. I think this is more applicable to individual jobs. I think when we're talking about hourly paid people, then they really should know. But some jobs are quite specific, and you can get out of touch and not realize that you're underpaying. That's Ellen's task now, is to explain to her boss, help her boss to understand she's not being demanding. She's just really saying, this is what I believe the fair market price is for my skill and expertise.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, there's a point in the book where Ellen finds out that she's just barely above the minimum for her job. So it was 25,000. I think the range was 25,000 to 60,000 when she went and checked in the marketplace, and she was making 25,500. At that point, the negotiator is very excited. So tell us why that is an exciting thing, instead of, I think Ellen has this sense of, I'm disappointed, or I'm worried or concerned that it's so low, but the negotiator has the opposite reaction. So can you share why that could be?
I think it's because what that data demonstrates is that there's tremendous potential in this negotiation. Ellen is good at her job and could make a reasonable case for being at the top end of that range. And so from 25,500 up to 60K, that's an enormous jump. So from the negotiator's point of view, wow, there's so much potential in this negotiation. Now, from Ellen's point of view, it's almost more daunting, isn't it? Because she's thinking, I can't possibly go into my boss and ask him to double my pay, at least. And so that feels really daunting, and which is understandable. But it's important that one of the things, the traps that we can fall into, is that if we do come into that situation where we find we're very underpaid, that we get anchored by our current salary. Now, if we've got the data and our current salary is way too low, then it's way too low. It might be the salary you're getting, but it's low for the market. So in your head, don't let yourself be anchored by your current salary. You've got to look at what is the fair market price. And if that's a lot more, then that's a reasonable thing. Now, we may need to think about the best asking for that, because if you go to your boss and say, I want you to double my salary, that's going to be a shock for your boss as well as for you. You've got to think about strategy, but don't be anchored just by your existing salary is an important point.
Yeah, that's a good point. How do you manage that expectation with your boss where he or she is not shocked? So what is best practice to approach your boss or give them a heads up that this is coming? And how much time should you give your boss?
I think a couple of things on this. First of all, don't catch your boss. Don't have a corridor discussion about it. Make sure you make an appointment. Tell your boss what it's about, but don't get drawn into the debate while you're making the arrangement for the meeting, because that's another mistake you can make, and then you're not really properly prepared. So I would say use some sort of vague thing. I want to talk about my salary, and if your boss starts to draw you into it at that point, just say, if you wouldn't mind, could we do it, get into the detail when we meet, because I've got some information I need to share with you. So that's important to do. And then don't expect your boss to give you an answer in that meeting, particularly if you're going to be very bold and ask for a big pay rise. He or she is going to be, whoa, that's going to be a reaction. That's fine, I think. But yeah, so accept that your boss will need to go away, look at the information that you've given, consider it. Then there are other factors where your salary is in relation to your co-workers, could be an influence. And your boss may be thinking, if I give this big increase to Ellen, am I going to need to give this big increase to someone else? In passing, that's something that's worth mentioning. Make it clear to your boss that this is a private conversation between the two of you. You're not going to go out the office and tell everyone in the office about that. You could if you want to, but you need to bear in mind that if you do that, you make your chance of getting an increase less, because at the end of the day, you can only represent yourself. You can't represent everyone. Reassure that it's confidential. Don't demand an answer there and then, but do try and persuade your boss to agree to a subsequent meeting, maybe in a week or two after they've had time to consider the data.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, in the book, the negotiator asks Ellen, what type of person is your boss? Why is that important, Michael?
I think we all respond better to people who behave in a similar way to us. So you may have seen people suggesting that when you have a meeting, try and mirror the other person's body language. That's a sort of common thing that's said, and there's something in that. You need to be careful you don't do it too obviously, otherwise it looks a bit daft. But in the same way, the way the person talks, when I say that, whether they're very business oriented or whether they're more emotion oriented, so try and reflect the type of way they conduct themselves. If your boss is really just the numbers, show me the numbers, then provide the numbers. If you feel that perhaps your boss would be, for want of a better phrase, upset to find out that you're underpaid, then don't be shy about making it look like you're upset. Maybe you are upset, but again, as with the body language thing, don't overdo it. Don't make it too blatant. But it's just about trying to use the language, if you like, that your boss use, and then people respond to people who are similar to them.
And of course, in the book, Ellen has a great boss. She really likes and respects him. What is your strategy if your boss is somebody who plays hardball against you, right? And is perhaps shows umbrage if you ask for more money? There is a real fear that people will get that retaliation, and leaders in the corporate world, specifically women, do have that fear that the boss will retaliate or act like in a hardball fashion. What should they do? How should they prepare, number one, and how should they deflect those types of strategies?
Yeah, and I think that is a very reasonable concern, because I'm afraid people do that. They take umbrage at you asking for a pay rise. And frankly, that's an emotional ploy, which is I feel is very unreasonable. But how are we going to deal with it is the question. I think what we've got to do is not allow it to make us emotional. Okay. What the negotiator explains to Ellen in the book is that essentially an employment contract is an employment contract. This is a business relationship. We're not husband and wife here. This is a business relationship. I do work for you. You pay me compensation for that work. So if that emotional play gets played as a sort of negative tactic, the response there is to actually go the opposite, not to be emotional, to be, here's the data. You've got to try and put a barrier to that emotional manipulation, because that's what it is, really. You've got to put up a barrier to the emotional manipulation and say, look, here's the data. This is the information, and I'm presented it to you, and I don't think my request is unreasonable. When I said about mirroring the emotional or business-like thing, that's when, in a positive way, when the other person is being positive. If the other person tries to manipulate you emotionally, then I think you do need to withdraw emotionally and get back to the numbers. Now, importantly, with regard to numbers, the more you've done your homework, the more confident you will be. So one of the key things that Ellen has to do in the book is to research what her salary is. And the more you've done that thoroughly, the more confident you are that those numbers are right, then you're more confident you're going to be in yourself. So if your boss does play that tactic, then you go back to the numbers and say, here's the numbers.
That's very good, because there's even a quote in the book about data and evidence versus feelings. Can you explain that or expand on that just a bit more?
Ultimately, it says something along the lines that data is what really matters. Your feelings don't really matter. I'm paraphrasing there, but something like that. No, the key thing is, just because you may feel you deserve a pay rise, and you could go to your boss and saying, I'm doing a great job, I want a pay rise, but why? Because as I've just said, it's a market. You're putting your skills forward in a marketplace, and whatever your role is, there's other people doing the role, and it's always going to be a range, but there's a market price for that level of skill and experience. That's the sort of thing that is really hard to deflect away from. Now, if you just say, I need a pay rise, your boss can just respond by saying that you're already well paid. And then where are you? If you've got no data, you've got no defense against that. So it's really the data that matters, and feelings, I'm afraid, are often not effective in these circumstances.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I love that point, because both the fact that you have evidence as well as the evidence adds confidence to your pitch. They're twofold reward. So it's really important to do that preparation and get that content, the research or data.
Absolutely. And one of the other things that is helpful is perhaps rehearsing. Get a trusted friend or a partner and get them to play the position of your boss and rehearse the discussion, because that also will help build your confidence. Try and think about the sort of ways you know your boss. You can help the person helping you explain what type they are. And it feels very false, but actually it's quite valuable in having done it as a rehearsal. So when you go into the real meeting, it's just a little bit less daunting.
Yeah, don't let that be the first time you ever say those words out, right? Because now you're in prime time, so to speak. Yeah. So in the book, it's very interesting. I love the book, by the way. The story is such a great way to explain some of these, what would seem complex techniques and tactics, but it's very well done. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
The negotiator is friendly and warm, but he maintains control throughout the conversations, even when Ellen is flustered or when she pushes back. What is the secret behind that? And any tips and techniques on how you manage that to remain calm and in control of a conversation?
I do think we've touched on part of it already, is doing your homework. So you go into the meeting very prepared. But the thing about warmness and courtesy is that it costs nothing. So when we're talking in the commercial world, we're always thinking, trying to trade. What can I give the other party so they can give me something back? And of course, giving courtesy and good manners and all those sort of things, they don't cost anything. Yet we're human. We always respond in those situations. And so this is a general negotiating point here now, is that there's a stereotype idea of a negotiator who's a sort of grumpy bruiser. That actually is completely wrong. So it's about being assertive but not aggressive. And so that the difference between those two words, assertive means being confident of your argument, but not making this sort of power plays that we were just talking about, not using emotional manipulation either way. So it's being confident in your data, presenting it, staying calm, and being friendly on a personal level, but absolutely on the data, very strict, and the data is the data. That's the technique. And then that's, as I say, that's a broad negotiation thing, is that, for example, in a commercial situation, I will always, within reason, allow the other party to set the venue, set the time, all these things that don't cost anything. So I'm terribly cooperative with all those things, very polite when I meet them and all that sort of thing. But then when we get down to the nitty-gritty, then that's when the assertiveness comes in. So similar, if you're negotiating your pay rise, be very cooperative, friendly, but very rigid on the data. Now, you may have to negotiate on the final numbers, but the data is the data. Have a lot of confidence in it if you've done your homework. The data is the data. How can we deal with this? Is reasonable. This is what the market says. So that's the difference. So it's assertive and not aggressive.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you've made this point in the book, as well as you've alluded to it. It's not a high octane Hollywood style winner takes all conversation. It's more problem solving, and yes. I think you use the word exploratory, right? You're an explorer.
Yes. That's right. So you've got your data. So your data shows that you're underpaid. This is our problem. This is the problem now. So how can we? The obvious way to resolve the problem is increase the salary, but it's less in your face. This is a problem. It's not unreasonable for me to be paid at the market rate. What can we do about it? So when you put that open question to it, you're putting it back to your boss. That puts him or her under a lot of pressure, doesn't it? What can we do about it? We all know what they can be doing about it, but what can we do about it? It's a problem. So that's, in a way, that way you're putting that problem right in the middle of the table and not allowing it to be brushed away. And so it's an exploration rather than a war.
Love that. Love that. Michael, shifting gears just a little bit here. We've talked about the book. And then when we first met each other, you had mentioned that you've been negotiating for many years. And now that you have your daughters in the workforce and they're sort of facing workforce challenges as well as they're negotiating their way through their career, there's a little bit of a difference between women negotiating and men negotiating. What aha moments have you had since you've seen your daughters in action and how they're approaching negotiating either pay or positions in career or however they're navigating through that?
Whenever I'm asked these sort of questions, I'm a little bit hesitant because obviously I'm a man talking about women. I'll do my best here.
Yes.
I think I have observed, and the data does back this up, is that men, not all men, we're talking in generalizations,
yes,
but men tend to be more competitive and more aggressive and more go-getting for what they think they deserve, whereas women are in general more cooperative and sometimes maybe not as focused on money. I think men see a salary as a recognition of their worth, as it is in a way, but women don't seem to put it at the same level of priority. And again, the data backs this up. And so I've certainly seen that in my daughters, and my wife is in the workplace as well. And so I did consult with them widely because I had this issue of I knew I wanted to have a female lead character for all these reasons, but obviously I was aware I was a man writing. So my daughters and my wife read and reread the book several times for me to make sure that Ellen was a credible female character. But it's definitely an issue because at the end of the day, there is a gender pay gap. And obviously, governments try to do something about that. But maybe individual women, if you like, have a responsibility to all women to make sure they get what they're worth, because that contributes to the gender pay gap as well. So I think I've tried to bring up strong, confident daughters, and I think they are. But there is ultimately an inbuilt slight difference of perception on these things, and that's why we need to encourage women to understand that they're worth what they're worth. It's not unreasonable to ask for a pay rise if you're underpaid.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think women, if they do accept that I need to ask for more, and they are more assertive or more aggressive, pick your word, that they get a backlash that is disproportionately higher than men would get? Define backlash however you would. The negative, or I don't think you deserve it, or how dare you deserve it, how dare you ask for more. What is your perception, or what do you know what the data says on that?
I'm afraid the data would back you up on that. Is that sadly, actually, whether it's a female boss or a male boss, there seems to be more pushback against women than men. It's not reasonable, but that's the world we live in. It's a kind of emotional play, and the way to defend against that is not to allow it to affect you emotionally. It's a blatant emotional play to undermine you and get back to the data. And but sadly, that's the world we're in. Sometimes, too often, you'll get a different response to a man than you will to a woman asking for a pay increase. And again, the data sadly does back that up.
So I do like that you provide us with a defense. Go back to your data, go back to your evidence. So coming back full circle a little bit on the preparation piece, it sounds boring. And whenever I'm teaching negotiations, here we go, preparation. How can we underscore, emphasize, overemphasize how important preparation is? And Can you give us a little flavor of what you do for preparation when you're going into your commercial negotiation, and how deep do you go, and what kind of research do you do?
Essentially, when we're talking about a commercial situation, it's not that different. It's about saying, what is the market price? And so there's a lot of work that goes into that. In my case, I would go globally, depend on the contract that we're talking about. What is the price in Asia? What is the price in Europe? What is the price in the US? So there's a lot of work that goes into it. The key thing to remember, and this is just not a fancy stat, this is reality, that 90% of your success will be in the preparation. That's really what's going to govern your success. And 10% in the meeting with your boss. Instinct would say it would be the other way around.
Yeah.
It isn't. 90% of your success. So actually in the book, Ellen, when she does a rehearsal with a negotiator, she makes a mess of it, doesn't she? She drops her papers and she gets in a terrible state and she thinks it's going to be terrible. But it was good practice. And actually when she goes into the meeting, she's still very nervous and sweating and everything. But that isn't really where the real work is done. It is in the preparation, because that data that you put in front of your boss, that's so hard to deal with. And also, this book has, a lot of people contact me about the book and give me feedback on what's happened. And it almost never happens that the boss will resent the fact that you've got good data. But very often they're impressed that you've gone away and done your homework. In fact, one of my clients had someone come to him and ask for a pay rise on a kind of odd ad hoc basis. And the boss had just read my book, and he said to him, go and read that book and then come back and speak to me. And the guy read the book and came back and got in front of my client, who was the MD, and showed all the data and everything. And he got a massive pay, I can't remember, 40% or something like that. So my client, the MD, was willing to countenance it, but he wanted the guy to go and do the work properly. Go and show me that you deserve the pay rise. I think that's why 90% of your success is going to be in your preparation, in your getting the data right, doing a bit of rehearsal, thinking about how to approach the person, what, as we said, what way do they talk? Let me talk their language. All that sort of thing is what really count. And then if you go into your meeting and it may feel like it's going terrible, but that's only 10% of your success there. It's 90% in the preparation.
Oh, that's such wonderful wisdom. Thank you for sharing that. Absolutely. And we fear that 10% and don't do the 90% part of the work, right? Instead, if you just focus on that 90% part of the work, the 10% becomes relatively easy because now you have all the data and the confidence.
Yeah, and you're going into that meeting knowing that I've done most of this job now. I've done most of this job, and now I can do the last 10 meters of the 100-meter sprint, if we want to put it like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Michael, this has been such a delightful conversation, and I want everybody to get a copy of this book. How can they find it, and how can they find you?
So I don't think we've mentioned the book is called The Naked Negotiator. That's and the reason it's called The Naked Negotiator is, as I touched on earlier, essentially all negotiations are the same. And so when you strip away the specifics of your situation, what's left is the naked negotiation. So the book is called The Naked Negotiator. If you Google The Naked Negotiator, you'll find it. It's for sale in all the major online bookstores. You should find it very easily.
Absolutely. And we'll, of course, link everything in the show notes and your website as well, so people can reach you if they have any follow-up or questions around negotiations or the book.
Great.
All right. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us.
It's been great, and it's been wonderful to talk to you, Dorothy.
Oh, you as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
There you have it, my friends. Some great nuggets of wisdom on how to view negotiations as a problem-solving exercise, how to not fear asking for a pay raise, and what are the best tips and techniques to be ready to advocate for yourself. I hope you took away some actionable nuggets. I definitely recommend the book, and I've linked it in the show notes. Thanks for listening, and bye for now. There you have it, my friends. As you know, I'm on a mission to close the pay gap. Every podcast episode is designed to give you the tools, techniques, and inspiration so you can bravely advocate for yourself. Thank you for listening, and bye for now.